It's time for...
It was the early 90s and there was no better time to be an American. The Cold War was over. The United States stood alone as the world's only superpower, and now they had been handed the biggest sporting event on the planet. Behind the scenes, however, the US had plenty of hurdles to clear. When it submitted its bid in 1988, America didn't even have a top-flight professional soccer league. Fortunately for the Americans, their opponents' bids were terrible. The US, on the other hand, had an F-ton of money and a landscape already covered in fully functioning American football stadiums. On top of that, the 1984 Los Angeles Olympics had been a huge success, so FIFA handed America its crown jewel. Yet people remained skeptical. Before the tournament, most Americans had no idea that the US would be hosting it. One survey from the era ranked soccer just 67th among Americans' favorite sports. Many people doubted the US could host a successful World Cup. But before all that, we had to get through qualification. Several nations ended decades-long absences. Switzerland, led by Roy Hodgson, made it for the first time since 1966, Bolivia for the first time since 1950, and Norway for the first time since 1938. Three teams would make their World Cup debuts. Nigeria qualified for the first time after Africa was awarded a third World Cup spot. Saudi Arabia also reached the finals for the first time. Their qualification came at the expense of Japan, who came within minutes of their own historic debut before conceding a late equalizer against Iraq in the agony of Doha. But the European qualifiers were where the fun began. Greece qualified for its first ever World Cup after topping a group from which Russia also advanced, competing independently for the first time after, well, you know. Meanwhile, England found itself in serious trouble. Defeats away to Norway in Oslo and the Netherlands in Rotterdam left them on the brink of elimination. Going into the final match day, they needed the Dutch to lose and they needed a win against San Marino, literally one of the worst national teams on the planet. So, what did England do?
And now, what's at stake? And Bachoki, number 9, picks the ball up straight away, and San Marino launched the first attack. Oh, and a mistake by Stuart Pearce, and San Marino had scored! I don't believe this!
England eventually recovered and won 7-1, but the Netherlands also won their match. England had officially failed to qualify for the World Cup, and the world rejoiced. Meanwhile, going into their final two matches, France was in pole position for qualification, but they choked in the penultimate game. Still, they found themselves needing just a simple draw in their final match against Bulgaria. The match was tense from the opening whistle, and as stoppage time approached, the score stood at 1-1, the exact result France needed. They earned a free kick near the corner flag, the clock was ticking down, all they had to do was some good old-fashioned time wasting. But for French Player of the Year David Ginola, time wasting was beneath the dignity of French football. Instead, he made the single worst decision of his life. He crossed the ball in. The cross was overhit and Bulgaria immediately pounced, launching a lightning-fast counterattack against a completely napping French defense. The ball worked its way to Emil Kostadinov, who from a tight angle unleashed an unstoppable shot over the goalkeeper and into the roof of the net. With barely 30 seconds remaining, an entire nation had been turned upside down. France had officially failed to qualify for the World Cup. The aftermath was brutal. The manager was instantly fired and Ginola faced so much public humiliation that he fled the country to play in England. Man, both England and France missing the World Cup? Just another reason why this tournament was so good. Under the sweltering sun at Chicago's Soldier Field on June 17, 1994, the opening ceremony kicked off. emceed by Oprah Winfrey, the grand finale featured Diana Ross sprinting up to take a penalty kick. Let's see how she did.
quality.
I sure hope that isn't foreshadowing for anything later in the tournament. As bizarre as this moment was, it perfectly captured the underlying tension of USA 94. FIFA was desperate to entertain an American audience, and that desperation forced major changes to the rules of the game itself. And look, as much as we like to make fun of Americans for ignoring the world's game, this time we can kind of understand where they were coming from. Because in the early 90s, football sucked. Italia 90 was the most boring and negative tournament in history, featuring a shockingly high number of red cards, a notoriously awful final, and the lowest goals per match ratio ever recorded. And in the Euro 1992 final, Denmark, who only entered the tournament as the last-minute replacement of, spent the entire match against Germany parking the bus, time-wasting and backpassing their way to victory. So ahead of the 1994 World Cup, several major rule changes were introduced to encourage attacking football. But the problems didn't stop there. FIFA and the broadcasters wanted to maximize viewership in Europe. So to ensure European TV could air matches during their late afternoon and evening hours, nearly all the games were scheduled to be played midday during June and July in places like Orlando and Dallas, turning stadiums into public saunas. And if you thought playing outdoors was bad, let me introduce you to the Pontiac Silverdome, the first stadium to ever host an indoor World Cup match. It featured an air-supported roof, which meant that to keep the roof up, the hot, humid air inside could not be allowed to escape. It was so hot that American midfielder Thomas Dooley bluntly described it as the worst place I've ever played at. But enough about the logistics. The tournament officially kicked off in Group C with the defending champions. 4 years prior, West Germany had claimed their third star. Now, the wall was down, the nation was reunified, and they looked stronger than ever. This was the first time a unified Germany had competed at a World Cup since 1938, back when they were... In the opening match, a single goal from Jurgen Klinsmann was enough for the Germans to edge past Bolivia. From there, both Germany and Spain comfortably cruised out of the group. Group A, the group of the host USA, but all the actual expectations were resting on Colombia. They entered the tournament as dark horse favorites. I mean, Pele even predicted they would win the whole thing. They had a brilliant qualifying campaign and they were playing under the constant threat of death. The team was deeply entangled in the shadow of powerful Colombian drug cartels and violent betting syndicates. The environment was so toxic that the head coach was receiving death threats over his squad selections. But as we all know, fear is not an effective motivator. That became painfully obvious in their opening match, where they suffered a shocking loss to Romania. Their second match against the United States became a must-win encounter. They needed 3 points to stay in this thing. But under the crushing pressure, tragedy struck. Attempting to intercept a cross, beloved Colombian defender Andres Escobar, no relation, accidentally deflected the ball into his own net, scoring the only own goal of the tournament. The US won the game 2-1. Ultimately, Colombia became the only team in the group to be eliminated. Just 10 days after the own goal, Andres Escobar was shot and killed outside a bar in Medellin. The murder was widely believed to be direct retaliation for his own goal, heavily rumored to have been ordered by betting syndicates who lost massive sums of money on the match. Escobar had spent his career working to promote a positive image of Colombia, but his murder shattered that progress, severely tarnishing the country's reputation worldwide. However, it finally forced authority to aggressively crack down on narco soccer, but it would take decades for Colombian football to truly heal. Man, that was depressing. Let's talk about something a little more fun. Group E. E for Italy. The heavyweights of the group were obviously the three-time champions Italy, fresh off a third-place finish on home soil in 1990. And a year prior to this tournament, they were ranked number 1 in the world by FIFA. FIFA rankings are never ever wrong. But there were early concerns. After failing to qualify for Euro 1992, Italy brought in manager Arrigo Sacchi. He was busy forcing the squad into a new tactical system, which was causing severe internal disputes in the locker room. And all those early concerns immediately manifested when Ireland shocked them 1-0, getting some sweet revenge for their knockout in the previous World Cup. The second round only made things weirder. Italy continued to struggle as Gianluca Pagliuca became the first keeper in World Cup history to be sent off. Yet somehow the Italians still managed to grind out a vital victory over Norway. Both final matches ended in draws, leaving every team with 4 points and a goal difference of 0. So after all that, FIFA had to start digging through the tiebreakers, and in the end, Norway was the unfortunate odd man out. To this day, it remains the only group in World Cup history where this happened. Group F was a toss-up for everyone involved, except Morocco. The Netherlands, now without Van Basten and Ruud Gullit, barely scraped their way to the top of the group. Heading into the final group game, the Saudis needed at least a point against Belgium to advance. Enter Said Al-Owaran. Picking up the ball deep in his own half, Al-Owaran saw a patch of space and took off. He shredded his way through a maze of Belgian defenders, running the entire length of the midfield to score the only goal of the game. That victory allowed Saudi Arabia to leapfrog Belgium and snatch second place in the group. On to Group B. B for Brazil. To the surprise of the footballing world, Brazil had gone 24 agonizing years without winning a World Cup, and heading into 94, expectations were low. Nevertheless, Brazil arrived with one of the strongest squads in the tournament. Claudio Taffarel guarded the goal. Captain Dunga provided steel in midfield. Up front was Deportivo La Coruña's deadly striker Bebeto, and alongside him stood the most dangerous player on the planet. Born in one of Rio de Janeiro's poorer neighborhoods in 1966, Romário de Sousa Faria's rise was nothing short of meteoric. After tearing up the Brazilian leagues and dominating the 1988 Olympics, he moved to PSV Eindhoven and scored 165 goals in 167 games, winning 3 league titles. By 1993, Romário had joined Johan Cruyff's legendary dream team at Barcelona, instantly winning La Liga and bagging 30 goals in just 33 matches. Now, in the prime of his life, he was stepping onto the world's biggest stage, ready to take on the globe. And he did not disappoint. Romário scored in all 3 matches, allowing Brazil to comfortably take top spot, with Sweden tagging along in second after earning their first World Cup win in 20 years. But the real history actually happened at the bottom of the table. In a final match between eliminated Russia and Cameroon, Oleg Salenko scored 5 goals. It had never been done in the decades prior, and it hasn't been touched since. And in that same match, Cameroon's Roger Milla scored his team's consolation goal, becoming the oldest World Cup goal scorer of all time at the age of 42. And finally, Group D. Much like Group F, this was a toss-up for everyone involved, except Greece. Despite having almost failed to qualify, Argentina entered as tournament favorites, having bullshitted their way to a second place finish in 1990. They were led by the one and only Diego Maradona. Sure, he was 33 years old and didn't seem quite as sharp as he used to be, but in their opening win against Greece, he completely turned back the clock. After a beautiful 1-2 passing sequence, he smashed a powerful strike from just inside the box. Just look at how happy he was, screaming like a maniac directly into the camera. Oh. So that's why he was screaming? Maradona's international career was effectively over. With Argentina in chaos, the door was wide open, and the team that kicked it down was debutant Nigeria. They were incredibly impressive, and thanks to a sensational 95th minute strike from Daniel Amokachi against Greece, the Super Eagles topped the group. But at last, I get to talk about Bulgaria, baby! Woo! After doing us all a massive favor by preventing air pollution in America, Bulgaria continued to surprise people. Heading into the final match day, just like Saudi Arabia, Bulgaria needed at least a point to advance, and they had to get it against Argentina. But they had their own X factor. Hristo Stoichkov, El Pistolero, was another vital piece of Johan Cruyff's Barcelona dream team, where he formed a prolific strike partnership with Romario. Woo! Stoichkov delivered exactly when they needed him, scoring a goal to help Bulgaria defeat Argentina. And just like Saudi Arabia, that win allowed them to leapfrog Argentina and clinch second place. The round of 16 kicked off with a fiery European derby. Belgium put up a hell of a fight, but ultimately they just could not contain the sheer attacking firepower of Jurgen Klinsmann and Rudi Völler. The Germans edged them out in a thrilling 3-2 victory. A few hours later, Fernando Hierro became Spain's hero, weaving his way through 4 Swiss players before slipping a shot past the keeper in a 3-0 win. Sweden also booked a ticket to the quarterfinals, cruising to a comfortable 3-1 victory over Saudi Arabia. But the real fireworks came later that day. Because Romania had barely scraped through qualification on the final day, most people had completely written them off. But they had actually been the most entertaining team of the tournament so far, driven by their own X-Factor, Gheorghe Hagi. Having topped their group, they were now staring down a Maradona-less Argentina. Did they actually have a chance? In the 11th minute, Ilie Dumitrescu answered that question with a free kick that looped over everyone and straight into the back of the net. Batistuta equalized almost instantly for Argentina, but Dumitrescu immediately grabbed his second to retake the lead. Then, early in the second half, Dumitrescu turned provider, perfectly feeding Hagi, who tucked it home from close range. Argentina never recovered, and Romania marched into the quarterfinals for the very first time in their history. The hosts, the US, faced a mountain of a task against Brazil. But it was the 4th of July. Could this be a sign? Could the tiny USA actually pull off a miracle against the 3-time champions? No. From the opening whistle, Brazil dominated the Americans. But then, out of nowhere, during a seemingly harmless play on the touchline, Brazilian midfielder Leonardo viciously threw an elbow straight into Tab Ramos's jaw, instantly dropping the American and actually fracturing his skull. Leonardo was shown a straight red card, meaning Brazil would have to play out the rest of the match a man down. Could this be a sign? Could the tiny USA actually pull off a miracle against the 3-time champion? No, they still couldn't. Romario and Bebeto linked up to score the game's only goal, sending the hosts packing. This was the 3rd time in history that Brazil had eliminated a host nation, having previously done it to Sweden in 1958 and Chile in 1962. Coincidentally, Brazil ended up winning the entire World Cup on both of those occasions, from one 3-time world champion to another. It was time for Italy versus Nigeria. But based on how they were playing, it was difficult to believe Italy had ever won anything. By the 25th minute, they were already trailing the debuting African side. And then, late into the game, Gianfranco Zola was sent off. They were down to 10 men. Up to this point, Italy had been massively underwhelming. They barely survived their group, advancing by the skin of their teeth as the 4th and final 3rd place team to qualify. And now, they were choking again. It was their tournament to lose and they were throwing it away. Their only hope was to look inwards. They needed a savior. They needed a man with the flair, the style, and the sheer individual brilliance to single-handedly drag them out of this darkness. They had exactly that man. Roberto Baggio was born in Caldogno, Veneto in 1967. Discovered by Vincenza at just 13 years old, he showed immense promise. But right before a transfer to Fiorentina, he suffered a catastrophic knee injury. The kind of injury that threatened to completely end his career before it even truly began. But Fiorentina refused to give up on him. They retained their faith, forging a deep lifelong attachment between Baggio and the club. He pushed through immense physical pain to become the team's talisman, eventually dragging them all the way to a UEFA Cup final against Juventus. And then came the controversy. He was transferred to that exact same rival Juventus for a then world record fee of £8 million. The move caused riots among furious Fiorentina fans, but despite all that, Baggio went on to have the best years of his life in Turin. Heading into the 1994 World Cup, the defining hair-designed ponytail was at the absolute peak of his powers. He swept the most prestigious individual accolades in the sport, including winning the Ballon d'Or by a landslide. Bottom line is, Roberto Baggio was the undisputed best player in the world. And yet he had kinda done nothing early on in the tournament. But now, Italy desperately needed him. They were mere minutes away from a humiliating elimination against Nigeria. If there was ever a time to turn up, it was right now. And damn it, he did. In the 88th minute, receiving the ball at the edge of the area, Baggio slipped a shot into the bottom left corner. He had just dragged the game into extra time. But Baggio was not finished. In extra time, he set up Antonio Benarivo with a lob pass, drawing a massive foul inside the penalty area. Penalty given. Baggio stepped up, coolly sent the keeper the wrong way and buried it. The comeback was complete. The savior had done it, and the Azzurri had officially been brought back from the dead. And finally, Bulgaria, baby! Woo! For the last match of the round of 16, the Bulgarian hype train rolled into a showdown with Mexico. Just 6 minutes in, Stoichkov detonated a powerful strike to open the scoring, bagging his 4th goal of the tournament. But Mexico answered right back 12 minutes later with an Alberto Garcia Aspe penalty. Nobody scored for the next 100 minutes, which meant this one would be settled from 12 yards. Enter Bulgarian captain Borislav Mihailov. He stonewalled 2 Mexican penalties, allowing Bulgaria to pull away with a victory. The Cinderella run was alive and well, and it was officially the Bulgarian golden generation. Kicking off the quarterfinals, a rejuvenated Italian side squared off against Spain. The Italians opened the scoring with a bang from Dino Baggio. No relation. Spain wasn't going quietly though. In the second half, Jose Luis Caminero launched a strike that took a wicked deflection and looped into the back of the goal to tie things up. With the clock ticking down and extra time looming, Italy launched a counter-attack. The Spanish defense completely fractured and the ball fell to Il Divino Godino. He expertly rounded the onrushing keeper and beautifully slotted it home. Once again, Roberto Baggio had dragged his team from the brink. But the game couldn't just end peacefully. Come on, it's the World Cup. There had to be some controversy. In the dying minutes, we got another elbow incident. This time leaving Luis Enrique, yes, that Luis Enrique with a bloodied nose. By every law of the game, it should have been a straight red card and a penalty for Spain. But somehow, the referee saw absolutely nothing. Italy got away with murder, becoming the first team to officially punch their ticket to the semifinals. A few hours after that, we got the match of the tournament, the Netherlands versus Brazil. The first half was a tactical stalemate, so nothing happened. But in the second half, the game exploded. Romario finally escaped the clutches of the Dutch defense and stretched out a toe to guide Bebeto's cross into the goal. Moments later, the provider became the finisher. Bebeto capitalized on backline confusion, darted past the keeper, scored, and then unveiled one of the most iconic goal celebrations in history. But the Dutch refused to die. In a span of just 12 minutes, Dennis Bergkamp and Aaron Winter both found the back of the net, completely erasing the deficit. Now, all the momentum was with the Europeans, and a Dutch comeback seemed possible. But then, Brazil earned their free kick 30 yards out. Up stepped Branco. He unleashed a thunderbolt of a strike that barely touched Romario and shattered the back of the net. After one of the greatest quarterfinals the World Cup has ever produced, Brazil survived and marched into the next round. Next up, Bulgaria, baby! Woo! Oh wait, they're facing the reigning world champions. Ooh! Just 2 minutes into the second half, Jurgen Klinsmann was fouled in the box and Captain Lothar Matthäus converted from the penalty spot. Germany was in control. They had not been eliminated before a World Cup final since 1978, and it looked like it was going to be business as usual. But just like the Brazil match, everything changed with a single free kick. The date of the game also happened to be the birthday of Stoichkov's daughter. During a phone call the previous day, she had asked her father for one simple gift: score a goal. Standing over the free kick, Stoichkov remembered that conversation and curled a beauty over the six-man wall and beyond the helpless German keeper. And then, just 3 minutes later, came the moment that would be immortalized in Bulgarian history. Before USA 94, Bulgaria had never even won a game at a World Cup. And now, this golden generation had just eliminated the reigning world champions. Bulgaria were in the semi-finals of the World Cup. To wrap up the quarterfinals, we got one last fiery clash between Romania and Sweden. 78th minute, Thomas Brolin opened the scoring with a brilliant set-piece routine. I'm starting to see a pattern here. 10 minutes later, from a free kick of their own, Hagi's shot was deflected and Florin Raducioiu smashed it home from close range to force extra time. 101st minute, a defensive mistake allowed Raducioiu to score his second goal of the game. And in that exact same minute, Sweden went down to 10 men. Romania were now just minutes away from a historic trip to the semi-finals. Just the mere thought of getting both Romania and Bulgaria in the final four had me salivating. But we are not allowed to have nice things. With 5 minutes left, Kenneth Anderson equalized with a towering header to drag the game to penalties. And in the shootout, it was the end of the road for the Romanians because Swedish goalkeeper Thomas Ravelli decided to turn on God mode. Still, even in defeat, it remains Romania's greatest World Cup finish ever, having completely defied all expectations. Now, you might have realized that up to this point, I have completely glossed over Sweden, who are now officially in the semi-finals. Look, they were also underdogs. They had also shocked the world. But there was just so much other unbelievable chaos happening in this tournament that they kind of flew under the radar, which is really just a testament to how incredible this entire World Cup has been. It was so good, man. It was just so good. It was officially time for the Final Four. The stage was set. Two Davids versus two massive Goliaths. Throughout this entire World Cup, we have seen upset after upset. Would we see another miracle today? Unfortunately, no. For Bulgaria, the divine ponytail was simply too unstoppable. Baggio struck twice in a devastating 5-minute spell during the first half. Bulgaria managed to claw one back through a Stoichkov penalty, but they just could not find an equalizer. Italy had secured their place in the final. Over in the other bracket, Sweden suffered a similar fate. They had already managed to hold Brazil to a draw back in the group stage, and they put up a hell of a fight here too. But their task got a whole lot harder for one very simple reason. The Swedes just refused to play nice. Eventually, in the 80th minute, Romario rose between two much taller Swedish defenders and powered a header into the net. It was the only goal of the game, and it was enough to finally send Brazil to their first World Cup final in 24 long years. Bulgaria and Sweden would meet to decide third place. Unfortunately for the Bulgarians, on the rare off day, they were blitzed by Sweden, conceding 4 goals in the first half. The Swedes departed the United States with bronze medals around their necks, their best World Cup finish since reaching the final in 1958. Not bad for a team I completely glossed over earlier. As for Bulgaria, getting dismantled is a pretty sour note to go out on. But it did not matter. They had given an entire nation the greatest footballing summer it had ever experienced. Hristo Stoichkov finished as joint top scorer with 6 goals, sharing the golden boot with Russia's Oleg Selenko. Later that year, Stoichkov would become the first and still only Bulgarian to win the Ballon d'Or.
These are big achievements for this country, and the people of Bulgaria ought to be proud of the achievements that they have achieved.
That 4th place finish remains Bulgaria's best ever performance at a World Cup, and it is probably the best we will ever see from them. You can bet your ass this will never happen again. At the Rose Bowl in Pasadena, California, more than 94,000 spectators gathered to witness the conclusion of a remarkable tournament. The final was a heavyweight showdown between two of football's greatest powers. Between them, they had already won 6 World Cups. Now, both stood one victory away from a historic 4th star. After 90 minutes, only one nation would leave with it. But despite reaching the final, neither side arrived without problems. Brazil's issue was philosophical. To get to this point, Brazil had abandoned their Jogo Bonito style. Instead, coach Carlos Alberto Pereira had built a highly disciplined, European-influenced squad that heavily prioritized defensive stability, which doesn't exactly sound very fun, and a lot of fans back home hated it. As for Italy, there was one tiny problem that I forgot to mention earlier. During the semi-final against Bulgaria, Roberto Baggio felt a slight tweak in his right leg. But hey, it's probably nothing, right? He'll definitely recover before the final. He did not. To make matters worse, Italy had to endure a grueling 6-hour flight just to get to Pasadena, which completely derailed any chance of a proper physical recovery. The Italian medical staff waited until the last possible second to make a decision. Then, the team sheet arrived. Roberto Baggio would play. He walked onto the pitch with heavy strapping wrapped around his thigh and a painkiller injection coursing through his system. Once the whistle blew, it was painfully obvious that Baggio was nowhere near 100%. He looked subdued, a mere ghost of the player who had single-handedly dragged Italy to the final. Without the divine ponytail firing on all cylinders, Italy had no choice but to bunker down and defend for their lives. Romario's lethal movements kept the Italian backline under relentless pressure, but legendary captain Franco Baresi and his defense miraculously held firm, managing to keep Brazil's terrifying attack completely at bay for a grueling 120 minutes. The final whistle blew on a 0-0 draw. Nothing could separate them, which meant that for the very first time in World Cup history, the ultimate prize in football was going to be decided by a penalty shootout. Baresi stepped up to take the very first kick and blazed it over the crossbar. Brazil had a golden opportunity to take the lead, but Italian keeper Pagliuca instantly redeemed his captain. The next 4 consecutive penalties were all converted, tying the shootout at 2-2. Then came Daniele Massaro for Italy. He fired right, but Taffarel read him perfectly, batting the ball away. Brazil's ruthless captain Dunga was up next. Completely unfazed by the pressure, he comfortably fired his shot into the right side of the goal, giving Brazil a massive 3-2 advantage. Italy had to score this next penalty to keep their World Cup dreams alive. If they missed, Brazil would be crowned world champions. And the man forced to take this kick was Roberto Baggio. He began the long, lonely walk to the penalty spot.
Roberto Baggio, the saviour of Italy throughout this tournament. He's missed it, and Brazil win the World Cup.
This tournament started with a missed penalty, and now it ended with one. Brazil erupted in absolute euphoria. They had finally ended their 24-year drought and claimed a record-breaking 4th World Cup title. The team dedicated the championship to the late Formula 1 driver Ayrton Senna. As for Baggio, man, this is heartbreaking. He was the sole reason Italy even made it to the final. The miss was so devastating that he died? Oh wait, no. As the ball cleared the crossbar, Baggio stood completely motionless, head bowed in a state of crushing desolation. It was an image that earned him the immortal nickname, the man who died standing. He didn't actually die. Phew! Baggio would ultimately receive the silver ball as the second best player of the tournament, finishing just behind Romario, who took home the golden ball as the MVP. Both men would go their separate ways, moving on to have incredibly fruitful careers. Despite all the initial skepticism, America '94 was an undeniable success. In spite of the scorching summer heat, every single stadium was packed to the rafters. The tournament ended with an average attendance attendance of nearly 70,000 fans per game, the highest ever at a World Cup. This World Cup served as a catalyst for the sport's growth in America, leading to the creation of Major League Soccer. Plus, all those new rule changes paid off. In the end, USA 94 will forever hold a special place in football history. 4 years later, the World Cup would move on to France, a team that did not even manage to make it to this one. I'm sure they absolutely won't do anything remarkable on home soil. Nothing at all.